All right, now let's dive into prototyping. So we just got this PRD generated and it's pretty high level. There might not be as much user research in this PRD as we might hope. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we go over just kind of data organization and going through a lot of data and insights and insight management and stuff like that. But let's kind of take this to the next step, which might be a very high level prototype. So I'm going to take this PRD, and I prefer the one from Bill Better just because it has some context about our company. But I'm going to take that and we're going to start prototyping it. Now, there are two prototyping tools that I generally recommend to people. The first is Replit, and the other one is V0. They're quite different in some of their form and functionality. Their goal for both of these are to try and generate like an actual product that you can ship and sell and use. And that might sound like it's overkill, but in the reality is just because it can do something crazy doesn't mean it can't do something simple. And I found that depending on what you're trying to generate, Replit or V0 might be a little bit better at these tasks. Replit tends to be good if you're trying to actually make like a production ready prototype, like maybe you actually want it to like work and do something specifically, like actually generate the insights and stuff like that. Whereas V0, it can do a lot of that functionality and you can actually spin up a whole instance. I found that getting it to that full-on production can be a little bit more challenging and difficult. For all of these, you can upload and use like Figma, like existing Figma mockups. You can also attach files. So if you wanted to do a screenshot or something that you might have seen online, you can do that. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, I'm working on a dashboard. Here is the PRD for it. Can you start to generate a UI for this? So I'm not giving it a ton of prompt. I mean, the document itself has a lot of information. And right now what it's going to do is it's going to start generating the UI for this. And you might be asking, Spencer, why are you going to coding? There's plenty of like UI AI tools that are out there. And to be honest, we've tried them all and they all suck. The reason we think for this is visual learning is still pretty new. So it's much better at writing code because it knows coding and it's been trained on coding much more and much better than it's been trained on UI design and UX design. As a dashboard or something like that can be much easier for it to generate and think through. So see here, I got an error. Looks like line chart is not found, probably because it didn't import that. You just say fix, hit enter, and it will kind of keep going. I'm going to take this same prompt that I used, and I'm going to copy that and show you what that might look like in Replit. Use this. I think I can just do that without needing to give it much more context because the pasted text, it's a lot of pasted text. You do have to think about context limits. So every model that you use has a certain amount of knowledge that it can consume before it starts forgetting or just remembering less. And as you start using these models, you start realizing, okay, these are starting to get really complicated. It's starting to lose the information I first talked about. And what you can do is you can start a new chat. And I'll show you some of the things that we can do here. So it's asking, it's like, hey, would you like to add call recording integration to this dashboard, implement custom model integration, advanced filtering capabilities? And you can see the Replit is trying to really build this into like a real product that customer can sign up for, where this one is still struggling getting the line chart going. But hopefully we'll kind of get this running. But while we do that, let's just say approve this plan and start generating the code. So we'll kind of see how these two think a little bit differently. But one thing while these are going is you'll kind of see that it's generating code. And I'll be able to kind of edit it and kind of think about this a little bit more concretely. It looks like it's having a really hard time realizing that it needs to keep importing a lot of these, but it's not done yet. Let's see if we can get the importing. You can see I'm not coding. I don't have to know anything about coding. It's getting errors. And there might be 1,000 reasons why it might be doing that. But it automatically kind of tells me what I need to do next to resolve those errors. And I don't have to know any of this stuff. I don't have to know any of the coding. But it's good to know, like, you're not going to get something on the first shot. So this is looking pretty good. We got customer dashboard insight, competitive analysis. Looks like we got strengths, weaknesses, customer feedback, strategic insights, overview, user growth, usage, or something like that. So maybe I'm building this customer dashboard. It's still got some error, but I'm still able to see what it looks like. But let's just fix that error while we're at it. This one is still coding up the storm, but you'll see that the Replit tool is probably going to be more of like a production tool, something that you might actually look at and say, oh, like that would be more complex. That would be a little bit more down the line of shipping something that a customer could use or might want to try. Whereas V0 is much good, I would say, UI kind of prototyping. Looks like this line goes all the way over there. And I can even ask that follow-up. The user growth chart looks like it's expanding past its card or cell and into the feature usage. Can we clean that up? And I'm just talking to it like a person, like as if it was a designer or something like that. And you can see here, I mean, all this is dummy data. None of that is information that, I've given it. It wasn't in the PRD. And it looks like this one's still installing some libraries and still kind of getting things going, but it's probably will be done somewhat soon. And you can see here, I'm already kind of iterating and it's made even more of a mistake. So I'll kind of go back and say, that's worse. The user growth chart is now completely into the feature usage chart, and the feature usage chart is now off the page. So you can see that like you're not going to get a perfect response every time. But again, even if I were to go into Figma and try and prototype this, I'm just going to have a much better, more responsive UI here. And I can keep editing. I can keep going through this. And as a product person, I often find that it's much easier and much better for me to think through flows. So how does this data go from one step to another to another? How do what happens when a user clicks on total users? So I might even do that. It looks like it's going to keep making a mistake here for whatever reason. So we'll kind of ignore that because if I was shipping this to someone, I'd probably spend more time on having this. But honestly, even if I share this with an engineer, I think they could reasonably guess what I was trying to go for. But I might say when a user clicks on total users, can we have a UI pop out on the right that shows a list of the users available? And, again, I can just keep talking to it, keep adding. I mean, I've spent sometimes weeks working on a dashboard or a specific UI or whatever it might be, and you can really get detailed and really get knowledgeable. What you might find, though, is that after a while, these systems can kind of start forgetting and kind of losing context. So I could add this to a project. I could create a new project here and I could start adding it to it. And then in that project view, I can actually start new conversations with the same data. They also have a fork model. So I'm going to be able to click here and now you'll see I'll have a user list. So super easy. And again, I didn't have to design any of this. If there was a product that I was trying to mimic or something like that, I could have given it that UI, or if we already had mockups, I could have given those mockups. But let's say I wanted to fork this. Let's say it's not understanding. There's a lot of context. There's a lot of new information, or I just want to build something new. I want to create a separate dashboard. There's too much knowledge already in this one. I want to create something separate. I can just kind of fork this, and now I have a brand new chat. So it has all the same context of this. And then let's make a sidebar with other dashboard options for users. I'm not even going to care about my spelling at this point. It's smart enough to figure that out. And then you can see this Replit one. This is a lot more. And this might be much better. I mean, it actually got the context that we wanted to do. I mean, we remember in that PRD, it had the type of heat mapping. It wanted different types of UI. And so it's pulling from that context. And while the VO got a decent idea, it didn't really nail exactly the right experience I wanted. This one gave a much more like high fidelity experience than I was expecting. Competitor analysis, and you can I can see now mixed panel amplitude, market share of each tool, strategic recommendations. It even generated some recommendation here, recent updates and stuff like that. And then here, competitor analysis, which competitors do I want to do an analysis on? I can do a feature matrix chart. I mean, look how in depth this is. I mean, this is more than I was even thinking. This is more than what was in the PRD. This is pretty cool. And I can even export this to a PDF or an Excel sheet or a CSV. So you can see just, there's some errors here. And maybe I could even say, Looks like the strategic insights is having an error. I don't even have to know what the error is. I know this is an error. I'm going to copy and paste this, just give it to it, let it figure out what to do with that. And then the V0, okay, I have the dashboard, I have the left menu. Again, V0, you can see it uses more simple components, which is much easier for kind of UX and UI kind of mockups and kind of like high level stuff. But I can just keep going from here. I can keep adding more features. I can keep thinking through, specific directions I might want to go. I could even share this or deploy this on the internet, so I can just share a link, and then the engineering or UX team or research team can now look at that and say, oh, that's what Spencer was trying to go towards. That was the concept that he was trying to have. So, it's very easy for me to now kind of go between this, and I can keep developing on this. I mean, I've spent many, many weeks on some pretty in-depth dashboards and UIs and experiences and really prototyping it. And you'll see here that it'll kind of edit it. But so that's kind of prototyping with some of these tools. And again, there are tools like Figma that have some, high level prototyping that you've probably seen. I have personally found that those aren't as strong as actually building something like this, because I think what your goal is really here is to get rid of the ambiguity. Product management is often like this hunt of kind of eliminating the ambiguity that we have. So I personally really love getting this fidelity, this detail, even if it doesn't look like my product. I mean, obviously I can kind of give it some prompting and some ideas about what our product looks like. I can really start saying, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. Oh, that actually might not work. That actually might be too complicated. Or, oh, I actually have to think about what data, how do we generate this data? How do we get this data? Maybe we need to have smaller projects kind of being broken out. And I could take this and I could say, okay, here's a competitive strength analysis. And now I'm going to go back to the PRD and I want to include that. And I want to kind of improve that over time. So a lot of this, again, is a really incredible way to start prototyping, start thinking through these ideas. You can start saving these to the projects. You can start kind of spinning these things up, and they're pretty cheap. I mean, this Replit charges you per usage, but this entire dashboard cost me 50 cents. Well worth 50 cents. And the VO dashboard is you have a certain amount of usage that you get for free. Same thing with Replit, you get some agent stuff for free. And then you can also pay for an unlimited amount of usage with V0. I personally and my team, I think we find prototyping with tools like this much, much, much better than, kind of doing some wireframes in Figma or doing some UI AI stuff. And we often find that this gets us straight to the point a lot more clearer, because we can kind of flush out every button, every experience. When a user clicks this is what's supposed to happen. When a user does this is what's supposed to happen. Instead of being surprised at the end about, oh crap, we didn't think about what happens here or there. Me as a product person, I'm able to really kind of flush out every UI, every experience, everything there. So that is what prototyping can really look like with AI. There's probably going to be a lot more tools that come out. We're working on some stuff as well, but I think from today's standpoint in 2025, this is really what is, I would say, the top tools that we use pretty regularly, and we hear from a lot of teams use pretty regularly. And again, you can make these better with your own documents, your own context, your own knowledge, your own screenshots, saving these into projects. I mean, you can make these so much better than what you're seeing here. I mean, this took us, maybe 10 minutes at best. And that's with me talking most of the time. So that is prototyping with AI and some of that stuff. And you might be, again, I'll give some grace and credit where I say, okay, this generated a PRD, looks like it wants me to log back in. Looks like it logged me out. But I'll say turn this into a visual dashboard. I'll do this with Claude. And sometimes you can get some kind of basic mockup. Claude can do some coding as well, and you'll kind of get some basic stuff. So I'm not trying to say that, OpenAI and Claude can't do some of this prototyping, but we'll see. I mean, it has the PRD that it generated here. We'll kind of see some of the more basic utility and some basic use cases here. But the sharing layering capability isn't really as useful. I would say it keeps stuff pretty basic. I mean, this doesn't look too far off from V0, but as far as me then turning that into something more usable or kind of keeping it into a very, very larger project, I mean, this is just a dashboard. It's probably the most generic thing that you can generate. But if I wanted something much more complicated, I have found that the canvas in OpenAI or the canvas in Anthropic struggles as things get more complicated. It's not to say that you can't use them, not to say that I don't recommend using them. It just depends on the project. It depends where you already are. So if you already have a pretty extensive product or a lot of features, and you're just trying to prototype something simple, sometimes keeping it in the ChatGPT canvas or the Anthropic canvas itself can be fine. I do find that V0 is much better even on those basic stuff. And then Replit can be really, really strong at building some really pretty extensive and pretty thought through UIs. Hopefully that kind of gets you started up and running on some of these prototypes after you've kind of generated some documentation about stuff. And the next section will kind of go through parsing through user feedback to make improvements to this and kind of what looking at a lot of data can really look like with AI. Talk to you later.